Welcome to this GFM talk about the future of learning. What I'm hoping to do is, during this talk, is to share with you some thoughts about how learning is changing, what we are exploring now in preparation for what is to come, and what the learning experience may be like for young people in the future. I have also asked a number of colleagues working on some projects to contribute, and they have kindly agreed to share some of their thoughts too. I will say from the start that these are our thoughts and ideas. This is of course a topic that no doubt lots of us will have ideas to contribute, and I encourage you to do exactly that. So what is the difference? I want to start by thinking about how learning has already changed. If we look at these two pictures and think for a moment about what is different. Initially, there may appear to be more the same than different, and it is true to say that the model of education since the Victoria era and the Industrial Revolution has not vastly changed. It does make us think about how we would design learning and schools from the ground up if we were creating them fresh now. To say that nothing has changed would be to undermine all the incredible hard work of many colleagues over the years. Of course, we know that there are things that are different. Looking beyond the pictures, the content of what is delivered in schools is very different. The style that children learn is very different. The age of learners, the picture on the left, in the Victorian age, children would usually leave school by the age of 11 because, of course, they go off to work. Now we have youngsters in schools until the age of 18. And then equally, the equity of learning in classrooms is very different. And a whole range of other things will have changed. But nevertheless, learning has remained broadly similar in the way that it's delivered for a very long time. There has, however, been a very significant change that has happened over the last few generations, one that has already fundamentally changed learning, and that is the internet. Knowledge has moved from being owned by the few to being very open, and therefore learning has changed too. We know there are fantastic websites for learning available now and developing all the time. Some examples on the screen there. Khan Academy, incredible learning opportunities there, originally designed for maths but now containing science, arts, all sorts of things. Code Academy, really interactive, fantastic way for anybody to learn how to code. Duolingo, many of us are using to pick up a new language. Fantastic learning opportunities, and of course anyone can choose to learn anything, and it is available mostly for free online. I imagine for everyone we can all think about examples of something we wanted to learn and how one of our first moves would have been to look it up on the internet, to Google it, or to use YouTube very commonly. Here I've looked at an example for learning how to skateboard, and I'm immediately presented on YouTube with hundreds of guidance videos to help me on my way. Look out for an expert ollie from me over the coming few weeks. So learning has changed, but how does that affect schools and learning in school? What we're going to share now is some conversations with colleagues and ideas from them exploring this now in our schools.
So Educake is an online website. It's English based, and it revolves around setting quizzes. The pupils can set quizzes themselves. The AI technology within the site as well has a revision wizard that, depending on questions that pupils get wrong, it kind of creates tests for them as well. And the format of it is, like I say, it's based on quizzes. Some of the quizzes can target English language skills, so kind of vocabulary, grammar, punctuation, spelling. But we mainly use it in English lessons for English language type kind of reading comprehension extracts that target different skills in comprehension, like retrieval, summarising, inference, meaning of words and things like that. Quite recently, in order to make Educate more embedded, we have started using Educate in the English department in the second half of library lessons that we have every 3 or 4 weeks. And I've had some really positive feedback actually in terms of the impact of Educate being used in these library lessons, because it very much provides a bit more structure to the library sessions. So the first half hour, obviously pupils kind of change their books, they're just reading openly, group reading and things. So in the second half hour, getting the Chromebooks out, which are stored in the library, every pupil logs on, which was a teething issue, but it's all been sorted now in terms of logons. And they're just really focused on their quizzes, whether that is one that is targeting a certain area of reading comprehension, or one that I have set centrally, or one that their teacher has set. I think that's probably the biggest difference, kind of the focus levels in the second half of the library sessions. So towards the end of the autumn term, so at that point Educate had been around, I guess, for over a year. And the response from learners was that they had, like, pretty much all of the pupils who filled in the Google form had logged into Educate. They were aware of what it was, but at the end of the autumn term, there was kind of a bit of a difference in terms of how many pupils had actually used it on a regular basis. But the pupils that were using it on a regular basis, I kind of caught up with, and they seemed to just kind of like the simplicity of it, to be honest, kind of how easy it was to use. Since having the library sessions, obviously it means that more pupils are using it on a regular basis, so we've been able to get a little bit more feedback. And teachers have given me feedback as well in terms of kind of how easy, again, it is to use, how the range of texts that we can use for reading comprehension is really broad as well. So there's like some George Orwell in there's some Dickens, there's Margaret Atwood, Stephen King, like really, really high quality texts that can be used. And I think, yeah, from a teacher perspective, but also from a learner perspective, one of the biggest things has been kind of the simplicity of it, how easy it is to use. And my MPQML focused on how Educate could be used to potentially improve not only reading comprehension, but reading confidence in learners, through using Google Forms and a pre kind of project Google form and a post project Google form. And yeah, the results were really, really promising. So in terms of the areas in which pupils didn't feel confident in pre-project, that had decreased post-project, and equally the areas that they did feel confident in pre-project increased post-project. I do the reading interventions in Year 8, and occasionally, I'll just kind of talk to them about their homework, and in the sessions, just kind of as we're walking to the room, and kind of what apps they're using and things, and they will mention Educate sometimes, which is really nice. And some of the authors, in terms of the extracts that I use in my interventions, overlap with some of the authors on Educate, so some pupils will sometimes make that link as well, which is nice. I think the future of Educate specifically is, because we only started the Educate lessons in the second half of library lessons just after the Easter holidays, so very much to keep that going, starting straight away from the library sessions in the new academic year. Equally, thanks to kind of the IT guys, there have been some Chromebooks put down the road in Broome Park as well. So this week, Broome Park have got library lessons, and they are doing the exact same thing. So kind of keeping that going to the end of this academic year, getting feedback on kind of what worked well, what the teachers thought about kind of using Educake in library lessons. And again, a little bit like the aim is for Bay House, picking up the library lessons, Educate sessions in September still, that would be the aim for Broome Park as well.
So Sparks is an intuitive online learning platform that we're using in all of our Key Stage 3 lessons, and it works on an algorithm. So students are practicing the key topics, and we've uploaded our scheme of work into the website, and this is the most differentiated resource that we could find. It does better than humans can do. So it's run on artificial intelligence, and students get personalised questions based on the level that they're working at. This also feeds into their homework, so things that they've got wrong during the lesson and things that they have been successful in the lesson. The algorithm recognises this for each student and gives them a personalised homework task, which is really providing us with excellent data.
I think as well the questions are provided, like that we can choose what topics they're doing, give both challenge and support, so they have videos to support them when they're getting stuck, or just if they are completely forgotten a topic, and it would support their books as well. The lessons don't feel different at all when using Sparks. They're still coming in and following their normal routines. They are doing the do-nows, so they're on the board, they are getting their books out and everything else. The thing that seems to be the difference is actually they're really excited to get onto there and use the platform, and the instant feedback that they get back from there makes them want to be doing more Sparks than they are written work, just as we would normally do it. So that's been nice to have. But I think they're so used to doing both and mixed together that when we have a lesson without it, for example, like an angles lesson when they're drawing and constructing, it doesn't feel different to what they normally would be doing.
One of the key features is the true independent work that students are able to do and engage with more so than I think we've ever seen in maths. And like you've touched on, the instant feedback and some really good practice that we've seen when we've looked at the teachers' lessons across the phase has been the feedback on the board, so you can project how every student is doing. So they get a little green block when they've got something right and a red block if they're stuck. Really easy for us to see in real time when students need our support and when they're trying questions more than once.
On the whole, really positive response from learners. They get discreet support, I think, as part of it with the videos. They often, we know how apprehensive our students are about asking for help, and the fact that they can get that without straight away having to ask the teacher or ask their friend has been really good for their own self-confidence, and knowing that they can just overcome something if they look it up or just try a little bit harder has been great to see. And then also just they know how much we're monitoring them as they're doing each question. It's not like they can leave a question and just give up. We are supporting them to get through every single question and see how they can work things out, which is just helping their problem solving skills and their exam prep and everything else every single day.
A really positive response from teachers, and I've been particularly impressed with the launch and the rollout of this as a new strategy and a new learning tool. I think the timing and the positivity around the launch has enabled us to have a really positive response from students, and our teams have been leading this from the front. There was, of course, that question, will we be replaced by technology? Are we still needed as good teachers? Yes, is always the answer to that, and we've worked really hard as a result of collecting responses and feedback from our teams to really think about what makes an excellent maths lesson, and building on that, what makes an excellent Sparks maths lesson. And that's made us think a little bit differently about how we use the technology that we have, which is absolutely better than what we could be creating, blending that with the excellent attributes that all of our teachers bring from our teams.
So in an ideal world, we would be able to differentiate for each individual student based on their ability, and I think we are working towards that in the developments that they are coming up with. Like every other week we've got new things that they're showing us, I think that's a great part of it, how much they've improved while using it and how much that can actually, so we have so many students who use it for their own independent learning, and I think that's the part that I would like to see pushed for as we go forward, is that actually students are taking what they're learning in lesson and going in and practicing that in their own time. And just trying to be the best mathematicians so they can be challenging themselves and even challenging their own teachers as to what their next step would be.
I think having both teams in the maths secondary phase being able to help trust-wide people understand Sparks a little bit more, and using Sparks at the primary level and in our special phases, I think that's something I'd really like to see, because this is such a good tool for all of our learners, and it meets a lot of the gaps perhaps that we've felt we've had in resourcing beforehand. And another thing I think we've learned and we'd like to continue with is we've entered into this as a customer to a new product, but we've not been afraid to meet really regularly with our reps and say, we understand the algorithm can do this, but what if it could do this? Or what if we could have this report? Or what if we could have this feature? Because for our students that really works. And for the most part, we haven't come to them with anything that they haven't been able to give us.
Yeah, and like really responsive and good with the feedback, and actually they are like building themselves and trying to make themselves better, and it has worked throughout. Like we've been giving them some really constructive feedback, and it's helping them improve too.
I think it's a bit of a watch this space for me, because we've been identified as one of the leading schools who are using Sparks, and we've got an exciting project next half term where a few of us are going to meet with two other Sparks representatives from two other schools and really bring the network together to think about what our policies look like. But to be driving that from within the GFM, and particularly Bay House and Broome Park, I think that's really exciting.
Hi, you'll be aware that the government, as a response to the COVID pandemic, initiated the National Tuition Programme, known as the NTP. The specific focus of the initiative was to enable pupils an opportunity to catch up and/or recover their lost learning time. The tuition needed to be delivered against a very specific formula and guidance that was very strict on its implementation. Capacity for this implementation across schools nationally has varied, as highlighted recently across various media sources. Ratios for tutor to pupil sessions were expected to reach a maximum of 1 to 3. And again, this is closely aligned to the guidance that's been published by the EEF research. And much of that expectation has been based on that current guidance and emerging research from across the country. As part of our COVID recovery strategy, the GFM utilised this opportunity to recruit tutors to deliver remote tutoring across year groups and subjects. This new team draws from tutors across the country and beyond to deliver tutoring at school and in the homes of our pupils. Some of our tutors are actually based in South Africa. Our learning has enabled advancement in how we are able to deliver bespoke opportunities through the use of innovative technology. This, as a result, has aligned the GFM tutoring model closely with blended learning modelling for all our pupils as we move into our future. We have to date engaged with nearly 1,000 learners through the tutoring offer. Over time, a greater understanding has emerged of how best to utilise this innovative approach to drive improved outcomes and opportunities for our stakeholders. We currently have 7 fully remote tutors within a team of 13. The Venn diagram I'm now sharing with you allows me to simplify the core components that are in place to enable this professional capital to continue to grow, alongside the systemic approach to delivering a tutoring model for the GFM that is fit for purpose. We are constantly learning and applying refinements to continuously improve. You will note that each sphere represents key areas that bring the model of remote tutoring into fruition. Subject leaders and teachers are essential in identifying the pupils that would benefit from the tuition offer. Each participating department has an identified point of contact to engage with the tutoring school. At the start of the journey, the tutoring team prompted engagement from the subjects, but this has now shifted to subject departments prompting and requesting actions. Obviously, this includes the teachers that are leading those subject areas. This has been largely due to the introduction of a tutor coordinator role to liaise with the departments. Our inclusion cell also engages with the tutoring school to target pupils to benefit from the opportunity as part of their personalised curriculum offer. Key to this success again has been the role of a coordinator, bringing the whole model together. Communication between the inclusion team and subjects is essential to enable the most efficient deployment of our GFM tutoring team. It can be complex due to the size of the trust. A big thanks to all those involved to date in making it happen, but in particular Molly Binner, our tutor coordinator, who is at the centre of all the activity that we coordinate. Academic coaching, educational psychologist intervention, counselling all have an online presence from the GFM tutoring school, both during and outside the school day. At the very heart of the model is continuous learning. All our tutors and team meet regularly to discuss and reflect each passing week online. This is our virtual school staff room and meetings schedule combined. Everyone participates and every meeting is recorded for those to access when they can't necessarily make the time of the actual scheduled meeting. As you would expect, safeguarding is paramount. With every remote session recorded, the unintended consequence of these sessions always being recorded is that we've got a complete record of every young person's learning over time. And in addition to this, the tutor's ever-evolving skill set of delivering online over time. This might appear daunting at first, but the team utilises this as a benefit. These recordings enable rapid alignment and consistency in practice. For example, all tutors at the end of every remote session quickly reflect on highlights to discuss and bring to the meetings, and in turn provide rationale for new protocols and improvements for all tutors to benefit from. Accessibility and convenience has been key to the success of the tutoring school. We deliver tutoring beyond the school day from 4 till 8 p.m, which has brought its challenges, but actually it's been remarkable the amount of engagement that the young people have provided, in particular the Year 8 parents and carers and the Year 8s themselves. This is an adjustment in the dynamic of what is known as the school day. We are flexible in how much time our tutors are able to provide, with some of the team providing 2 hours a week and others up to 25. This gives us a huge advantage in customising the offer. Stakeholder feedback has been key throughout, with online forms and surveys to continuously reflect and improve the service. But what next? What we're hoping for is to establish this team beyond the DFE funding for the next 2 years, and it continues to be stakeholder, evidence and research led. Please do get in contact if you wish to learn more.
Hello, my name is Luke Mulhall. I'm one of the assistant heads across the GFM. What I'd like to talk about is blended learning and how this has been developing within the GFM, and importantly what it means. So I'm going to start off with a definition for what blended learning actually means. So our working definition that we've come up with in the GFM after lots of research is a method of teaching that integrates technology and digital media with traditional instructor-led classroom activities, giving students more flexibility to customise their learning experience. Blended learning is any formal education programme in which student learns at least in part through online with some element of student control over the time, place, path and pace of their learning. Now there's a lot contained within that, but for me the most important part of that is student control and decisions over the different learning activities they're doing. And this is where online learning really comes in, because they have some elements of choice within this. So what I'd like to do next is introduce you to Wang's research on the complex adaptive blended learning model. I think this is a really interesting one. If you have time to read her paper, you'll find the level of detail in it demonstrates that blended learning isn't a new model, but what it does very importantly is put the learner right at the centre of the learning. And it's not necessarily just a relationship between the learner and the teacher. Actually, the teacher becomes part of the learning experience. The learning experience also includes looking at the institution and the places of learning, different layers of learning support that comes in. It brings technology into the model, but it's not exclusively about technology. And importantly, the content comes in as well. It's a learning experience. It's not just about students being told information, regurgitating it. It's the journey they go through. And it's a really important one that within the GFM we're developing and experimenting with as we move forward in and outside of the classroom. Now, the next thing I'm going to introduce you to is just a few different examples of how blended learning can work. Before we go there, let's talk about where it is, because blended learning isn't extremes. It's not about moving to the extreme of online learning or the extreme of offline. Blended by its nature is combining these things together. It's not about asynchronous versus synchronous learning. And in case you're not familiar with synchronous learning, synchronous is when you're doing things in real time. Asynchronous is when you're doing things at different times. So for example, watching a television programme would be synchronous because it's going out live. If you're watching a pre-recorded one or something on Netflix or another channel, then that can be asynchronous because you've got control over it and you can watch it at different times. So it becomes really interesting when we start to mix together those two things. And there's an important side to synchronous learning where you can have conversations and in real time respond to people. And that can be also online when you're working together on documents and work. But the asynchronous comes in this world where you've got choice of when you're working. Who's leading the learning also comes into this. We're trying to shift more towards the learner controlling their learning journey, as opposed to it solely being focused on the teacher telling the learner what and when they're going to learn. So we try and shift that more to a balance. Again, it's not an extreme. It is about this balance of the teacher and the learner together working on this learning journey. And then we also bring in how they're learning. Now it's always interesting when you look at a classroom and you observe classrooms, how many children are working individually in that classroom. Naturally they're in a group situation, but how many times do we always take opportunities to give the child the opportunity to work as a team and as a group and also individually. Equally online, we've got loads of opportunities now where we can collaborate together, where students can work, as I said, synchronously or asynchronously, but they can collaborate together and work as groups. So just because they're away doing their homework doesn't mean we have to move to a model where it's all about individual. Actually, we can do more collaboration. And again, we're not talking extremes. We're not talking everything's group learning. We're not talking everything's individual learning. Blended is marrying that up and bringing it together. So the important bit, why do this blended? Blended is just increasing a teacher's toolkit and increasing the opportunities to learn. It's about that personalisation, the flexibility to recognise that different learners learn in different ways and at different paces. It tries to accommodate all different learning styles and all different learning needs by giving students the opportunity to access different resources they need to access their learning. And it gives them, really importantly, choice. The choice to decide what they want to learn, how they want to learn. We can guide them down a path so we know the information they need to get, but also expand that learning opportunities, cover more aspects. So it's a really important place to go with learners, and this is where we see the redesigning of schooling is this expansion as students take more opportunity to learn. So let's just now explore a little bit about some models of what flipped learning actually means and what it means in the GFM. So I'll start off with giving you a really simple example, flipped learning. Flipped learning is something that's been talked about a lot. Loads of teachers have experimented with this. If you're not familiar with flipped learning, it's about giving students access to learning as homework and then coming back into the classroom and doing essentially what would be the homework. So you might send them away to watch a video, to do some activities and some exercises where they get the knowledge, and then when they come back into the classroom you might start questioning on them, giving them some activities to put it into context and flipping it around that way. So the learner comes prepared, knowing what the lesson's about. Now we're working within the sixth form. In the sixth form, the learners have asynchronous lessons. Now this doesn't substitute their traditional lessons. This adds a layer to their traditional lessons where they come into class, they have normal lessons with a teacher in a small group situation, but they also then go away and at least once a fortnight have an asynchronous lesson. So this is a fully designed lesson where they choose where they do it, when they do it, and engage with the different activities for it. It might be the case that some students watch a video and they might choose to do this on the bus on the way to school, or at home at different hours, or in school during some of their personal learning time. It might be that they watch the video, pause it, take notes and work out better ways than learning during that process. And they possibly even go back and re-watch it at different times, especially for their revision. So they build up this bank of online resources that they can come back to that supplements and develops their learning experience. And what we've seen in lots of ways is this means students are much better prepared for their lessons because they've got that opportunity to take time and digest their learning, go back and reflect upon it. And they've also been using it for their revision in preparation for mock exams and things like that. We're also taking this learning opportunity to look at children that can't always come into lessons. Now, we have an awful lot of learners within the GFM, and for different reasons at different times they can't access every one of their lessons. So what we're developing is online remote lessons that marry up to the work that they'll be doing in class, but then they can access. So that way, if they can't come into the lesson, or when they come to their tests and their exams, they want to go back and look at resources from it, then all of their teachers, as a matter of course, set work online. So we use Google Classroom to set work. That's just our forum to post work up there. They have that as a matter of course, but there's also additional online lessons that they can access and ask for help in. And as you've heard from Mr. Timon, he's been talking about mentoring and how that facilitates it. We've also got remote tutors. So at tutor time during the school day, students can log in, join them, ask questions and join that. So this is an evolving situation within the GFM where we're constantly listening to our learners to work out what works best as we move forward in this redefining schooling.
Thank you very much to my colleagues for sharing some of the thoughts and activities that are happening right now in our schools. I'm very aware that there are lots of other projects happening in all of our sites that are enabling us to explore and test what we think we know about learning. And these all contribute to our growing knowledge about what learning might be like in the future. I'm afraid I do not really have a crystal ball on this one, but I do want to use the last part of this video to talk about some of the things that are perhaps on the horizon. The good news is that there are plenty of researchers, think tanks, government bodies, both national and international, thinking about just this. So there are plenty of ideas being shared to prompt our thinking. It's easy to find a wealth of videos on YouTube with people talking about the future of schools and learning, and this can be helpful to, as I say, prompt some thinking and some ideas. If I look at just one such example, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development are an international intergovernmental body, and they often share reports on ideas about the future. Two that have caught my eye recently are the 2020 paper, Back to the Future of Education. This presents 4 possible models for future learning. These 4 models: schooling extended, education outsourced, schools as learning hubs, and learn as you go, offer some provocative thoughts on how learning and schools may adapt. These tend to be influenced by the powerful social and economic forces at play in the 21st century, but do offer an interesting perspective. The 2021 publication, Effective and Equitable Educational Recovery, is also very interesting. However learning develops, the equity agenda is rightly a key driver. One of our challenges is that the education system has been almost exclusively created and is maintained by people who have been successful in it. It is not unreasonable to assert that inequity is built in, and it is therefore our challenge to seek out and challenge this and avoid defensiveness in our response to areas we can improve that will improve learning ultimately for all. The curriculum is our mechanism by which we define what children experience and learn. As such, it is one of the biggest added values that schools bring to learning. Our collective design for our curriculum, our lessons, our clubs, our trips, and all the experiences that go into learning are what we give to our young people in our care. It was really interesting to watch the introduction and development of Oak National Academy during the lockdowns. What has remained is a tool that many are seeing as the minimum curriculum for school and learners to continue to learn. How will we design how to make use of this to fit with and enhance our curriculum aims is a question for us all to consider. Stuart has already talked about tutoring, but I want to think for a moment about one of the most important roles we play in schools to enable learning, and that is the role of the tutor. That person who has daily contact with a group of young people and can be the key person for developing relationships and supporting our learners through their journey. Luke has hinted at the introduction of an online tutor group, but it is not only technological solutions that can help us improve our ability to connect with learners. If we accept that learning has fundamentally changed with the shift from knowledge control to open access, the role that a tutor plays in coordinating, directing and coaching young people through their learning journey becomes even more crucial than it already is. Another thought for the future of learning is the physical and virtual spaces that it happens in. Specifically for our trust, many of our learning spaces are fantastic, spaces children are excited to be in and inspired by, but we know that that is not true for all spaces. There has been a huge investment in the physical buildings within our trust in recent years, and we are about to see the biggest investment in building refurbishment and replacement any of us have experienced. What are the spaces we need to create to enable effective learning in the 21st century? How can we ensure that our spaces enable us to blend, to support technological developments, easy access, tutoring in person or online? This is, again, an area that we can together design, that we can think about and work through. Alongside this, how we learn to value our online estate in the same way as our physical spaces raises questions on how we design this to enable collaboration, support and challenge, to ensure equitable access, and to inspire our learners whenever they use this space. I will end on perhaps our biggest challenge. Even if you have stayed with me so far, and even if you accept that the internet, social and economic changes have changed the way we all learn, assessment is likely to be the last bastion of the system controlling learning. We can be as forward-thinking as we like. If we know that there will always be an exam at the end of a learning journey, in year 6, year 11, year 13, or at any stage, it limits our ability to adapt to our world. This is a tricky one. We all want our learners to succeed, to do well in examinations. And this is really important. We want our learners to be able to choose their next steps and to be aspirational for their futures. Therefore, we are caught between supporting the system to enable our learners to succeed and seeking a possible alternative. I'm afraid I don't really have a solution to offer here, but I do share some hope for this challenge. Exam boards have shared thoughts about how assessment can be different. There are other models being used in other countries. We shouldn't let assessment, or rather examination, be the tail that wags the dog of what we want the learning experience to be and the lifelong learners we're trying to forge. Thank you ever so much, colleagues, for listening to the ideas shared in this GFM Talks. As I said at the beginning, I have no doubt that many colleagues across the organisation and others possibly watching this will have your own ideas, and I will once again encourage us to all engage in that conversation, to think about what is coming so that we can be better prepared, better able to serve our learners as we adapt and change. Please look out for a publication that will be shared shortly, which will pick up on many of the things we have discussed today. We hope that this gives you another opportunity to think and engage in this discussion. Wishing you all well for the half term. Thank you.